Hi, and welcome to this week's Meeting C++ blogroll highlights. And this week, it is not like last week that I directly spoil you. So there's been many interesting blog posts this week, but in the end, there has been one topic the community really has been talking about this week, and that is Herb Sutter's keynote at CppCon last week, which also CppCon has an article about. But of course, I want to feature Herb Sutter's blog when he has a post on it. So in this keynote, he talked about if we can make C++ 10 times simpler and safer. And so this is his blog article about it, which is relatively short. It's linking to his video. And usually I will not feature videos on here, right? But this is an exception I make because this is really an important keynote about this. If you want to understand this, you have to watch those almost 2-hour-long keynote, which talks about his motivations to do so. And it's basically, he wrote a transpiler, which uses a certain language, which is relatively easy and at the moment only supports functions and variables and some few other things to transpile into C++ and to use the C++ libraries, etc., which he wrote for this to be safe. His main motivation is that he wants a simple language, which is easy to teach and has the right defaults, and it has not like 2, 3, 4, or 5 or more ways to do something like, the prime example for C++ is initializing or declaring a variable, which you can do in various ways. And he, Herb argues that when teaching, you should have a language which is mostly free of pitfalls, sets some of the defaults which turned out to be wrong or which turned out to be not possible because we are still depending on C from C++ out in the perspective. He gets rid of all that. He is creating a new language, and it's kind of an experiment to see what if we create the simpler language, which is in C++, which always has been in C++, and just if we extract just that and give it a normal modern syntax, which by the way not everyone likes this function syntax, which you see here directly, but that is what it is at the moment. Maybe that changes, maybe that doesn't change. I am not sure if there's actually a syntax document on the language right now, and maybe this is just the first edition. We will see. But he also mentions that it's really, really important for him that this language is safe. And one of the reasons is that there is a US government directive that certain software things which run in various contexts, in this context, they should be safe. And they explicitly mention that using C++ and C is not safe. And I'm not sure if this means that you can't use C++ and C, or you would have to, provide certain certification for your implementation of the software you deliver to the government, that it's safe. And on the other way, he's like, well, it's time to see if we can make a language which transpiles into C++, but only uses those safe idioms and can enable certain checks at runtime, etc., if you need them. And it's a really an interesting experiment, and it's not like that he is doing this in a theoretic way. In this keynote, he actually plays with CppFront, which is a working tool which he open sources on GitHub. So this is completely Herb's idea. It's not tied to Microsoft or something. It is open source. You could fork it and make your own CPP2 or CPP3 or my CPP language with that. And as you see here, he explains some of the backgrounds on his GitHub, and I think that the CppFront page on GitHub is the better thing to read than the blog post. I wish Herb would have put a bit of this into his blog post too, because there's probably a lot of traffic on his blog post. But I will link to both in the description. And so he has created an experimental language which can use a standard library and also some other C++ context, I think, in the functions, and then will simply transpile that into C++. The language is based on the module system. It is using this to then generate valid code for C++, which can be, compiled with a normal C++ compiler. That is the goal. The language does not support a preprocessor, okay? So there are no includes in this language. You can only import modules, and hence, if you want to use something from C++ in this language, which is possible because he wants to kind of enable this backward compatibility, and he imports, for example, the SDL here as a module, which is a C++ 23 feature. And so this is like an interesting experiment which he has shown here during his keynote, and on GitHub he goes on with that, like, this is about experimenting using the features of 23 and 20 in a safe environment where you have a syntax which is shorter. You do not have to write as much as you would in C++, so an implementation of a program in CppP2 should be shorter and easier to write and faster to write. The language itself should be a lot easier and context-free grammar to parse, so that tooling would have a lot easier and faster time to do it. And also this would mean that compilation times for CppP2 would be a lot faster once you actually have a compiler which directly compiles CppP2, which would be an option to go for. Right now, it, of course, translates this with a transpiler into C++, and then goes for compiling this as C++, which might not make the compilation faster, right? And I usually don't want to comment too much on those blog posts. And so I've had an introduction to Carbon-Lang in April by Chandler Carruth. And I've seen Herb's keynote. That was my first impression and my only impression from CppFront and Cpp2. Herb has not talked about this, and outside of the folks he mentioned and thanks, I think, probably in his GitHub. So I do think that the idea of having a transpiler is something which I find interesting, and I have been writing in my past also tools which generated C++ code. I have a bit of a past for that, so it takes something in me. It is usable, and I do like the idea of Carbon-Lang. Also kind of interesting, but Carbon-Lang, from my understanding, is more like in a mode where it is for normal folks something where you cannot right now download Carbon-Lang and play with it, right? It's an idea. They have a syntax and they are working on it. But they also, kind of, I've heard the opinion that safety is like more an afterthought, that they want to add that later. The CppFront does it from the start, etc. And then there's Wall, which I don't know a lot about. And I know that Dave Abrahams and somebody else is mostly the drivers here. Dave is a great language designer, has a lot of experience with C++, Boost, and Swift and other languages he probably has been involved with or has used. So it's an interesting space. I did not put Rust on this slide because, in my opinion, Rust does not belong on the slide, because Rust is a programming language which you can write in fully featured language right now, right? So it's not like that. It's an alternative, yes, but it's not like something new anymore. So I see like all those languages on this slide as experimental, and we have to see where it goes. And probably in a year, I look forward to see if the next keynote from Herb or the next talk from Herb will be on CppFront again, and like how he integrates classes with this, etc., etc. And the other thing, as I mentioned, CppFront and Cpp2 is right now mostly Herb's work. And he has written the code. He has decided how the language should look, probably got some feedback on this from other people, how to do things and not to fall for certain pitfalls. And I think that moving forward, you would need to have this, and if this is open source, it should have some guidance. There need to be some community. Carbon Lang is a bit better with the Discord and a community and guidelines and a setup of a code of conduct. I think it's an interesting space. It's a space where people can get experience with syntaxes and making a language which is safe, and maybe also how we could, achieve something similar for C++, or like how we would be able to add features to C++, or how we, ensure that features we add to C++ are safe. And it's an interesting space which will grow, and it seems to be a trend. So maybe we'll see more on this. But for now, I kind of, I am curious if Herb has the capacity to follow up on this, to keep working on this, or if this is like, something which will be worked on again for some time to present on a various other conference, like maybe, or at CppCon next year. We'll see. It's an interesting idea, and I think it's an interesting idea to try to work out a simple language which allows you to use the full power of C++. That is definitely an intriguing idea. So let's see where this goes. And on the other hand, there's still C++. And there's a lot of articles about C++. There's an article about C++23, the stack trace library, and some C++20 posts and other posts which we have this week. So take your pick, and there's a lot to read again. Thank you for your attention.